I'm Laura, and I'm addressing you remotely from my home in London. I can't be with you because I'm too pregnant to fly at the moment, but I'd very much like to thank the organisers for inviting me to address LAVIS. And I'm going to be speaking on some early creole-like data from slave speakers from the island of St Helena, 1695 to 1711. One of the more unanswerable questions about language in the southern states of America has to do with the language of the first slaves who were imported into Virginia from the early 1600s, and it's reasonable to assume that they spoke a variety of languages. But the question is, did they also speak an English lexifier Creole, or did they speak the kind of non-standard English of the day? And I don't have the answers to these questions directly, but I do have some data which maybe sheds some light on the 17th century speech of slaves in one of the British East India Company's possessions. That's the island of St Helena in the South Atlantic. The East India Company and the free planters who lived on St Helena from 1675 onwards were slave owners. The slaves came from Guinea, from Angola, Java, India, Madagascar, Sumatra, Borneo and Malaya, amongst other places. And there's evidence in the court records, which are known as the St Helena consultations, that such slaves spoke 3, or even, as I'm going to make the case here, 4 different linguistic codes. In the late 17th century, the slave community on St Helena is represented in the court records as speaking the kind of non-standard Southern English spoken by the free planters and the soldiers. Now, this is the kind of default language in which the slaves and everybody else plead before the court. It is possible that the court recorder standardised the slaves' English and that it's presented as being more competent than it really was, but there's no direct evidence for that. Some slaves are reported that they couldn't understand others who spoke in Portuguese, a language used deliberately by rebelling slaves so others couldn't understand. This could have been contemporary Portuguese, or it could have been a Portuguese lexifier Creole. Thirdly, a kind of pidginized variety of English. Now, there's very little pidgin in the slaves' testimonies, but there is some, and as it's at such an early date, it's important. It's compounded by the fact that some slaves are recorded as using elements of pidgin to talk to each other as well as to the government and to the court. And the speakers who use such pidgin are also recorded as using English, and hence are code switchers. And fourthly, there's mention that some slaves spoke to each other in their country language, which is presumably the language used in their country of origin. Although St Helena is many thousands of miles away from the United States, it was a regular stop on the slave trade route, just as the plantations in the Caribbean and Virginia were. Slavers had to sell their human cargo at any port that would give them a price, and slaves could be on board a ship that called at several ports before being sold. Hence, what's known about the situation of speakers on St Helena is of interest for the studies of slave speech on any of the British-owned plantations. Firstly, some quick details about St Helena. It's a small island in the South Atlantic, which was of little importance to anybody until nutmeg was discovered growing in Pulo-Rune in the Bando Islands. St Helena then became a very important halfway stopping place because it had fresh water and fresh vegetables and lemons. The London East India Company's first visit was made by Captain Lancaster on his return from India in 1603. Its usefulness became very apparent, and throughout the 1600s, Holland and Britain fought over the island. Eventually this was resolved in the favour of Great Britain, and in 1673 King Charles II granted the island to the East India Company in perpetuity. From 1676 court records were sent home to London, and they're in the British Library, which is where I've been looking at them. I'm going to start with some very formal language just to demonstrate the stylistic range that you get. And so the first one comes from April 1682, and it's to do with the black inhabitants of the island. Whereas many blacks of the said island do in their travelling to and fro presume to enter into men's houses, pretending some slight occasions, such as a stick of fire or the like, when perhaps the owners are not within, or not at home, or none but children in the said house, it is ordered that from and after the publication hereof no black man or woman do presume to enter into any man's house on the said island by day or night, without first calling at some distance from the said house unto the owner or occupier of the same, and obtaining leave to have admittance. Okay, now notice how do support is attached to every finite verb. It's a feature of the legal register at this date, and also notice how the early modern subjunctive system is still operative, so that if triggers singular be rather than singular is, if upon calling no answer be made, and plural be rather than plural are. if there be none but children. Now these are still features of the legal register today, and indeed written early modern legal English could bear pretty much as little resemblance to the spoken informal variety as it does today. And I'm just including it here to give you some sense of the stylistic range. The next example is of the spoken legal register, which, although spoken aloud, is still stylistically very much marked for the legal style, with doublets and repetitions. This one is from 1695. Captain Poirier, the deputy governor, says, "Michael Isaac, stand at the bar and hear thy charge," which he did. "Michael Isaac, thou art charged here at this bar by the name of Michael Isaac of this island of St Helena, single man, for that thou, Michael Isaac, not having the fear of God before thine eyes, did by the instigation of the devil and wickedness of thine own heart, with some others as yet unknown, betwixt the 6th of November and the 7th of April last past, feloniously and traitorously draw, or assist feloniously and traitorously to draw, powder or ammunition out of 5 pieces of ordnance, viz. 4 of the nature of demi-culvering and 1 of the nature of a 12-pounder, belonging to the line before Fort James." Okay, so notice there how the early modern pronoun thou is still operative in 17th century St Helena English. In this case, perhaps connoting Isaac's inferior social standing, because you was the variety that was directed to social superiors. And there are other features which are old-fashioned for the date, such as periphrastic do again. These are due to the fact that legal English was and is far more conservative than other registers. I should mention that the use of thou is also occasionally found in other discourse in the St Helena records of this date in a non-legal spoken register, but you very quickly became the default form. Now, after this address from Captain Poirier, the deputy governor of the island, various witnesses from the garrison were called, and they spoke before the court in a non-legal register. I'll give you an extract. This is from 1695. The jury asked, "Gunner, do you remember in what month it was you found this gun to be drawn?" And the gunner replies, "No, I do not remember it." The judge says, "The day that the gunner told me he found the guns drawn was the 6th of April last, but I suppose that other persons will give you satisfaction." Robert Addis, the gunner's chief mate, sworn, saith that of a Saturday he was called by the gunner to draw a gun upon the east battery, and there found a gun of the nature of a 12-pounder to be drawn, and the cartridge thereof to be tied, and so with a little powder rammed in again, and upon further examination 4 more of the nature of demi-culvering to be drawn. And the jury asks, "Was the guns loaden by you before?" And Robert Abbas replies, "As for the gun on the east battery, it was certainly loaden, but as for the other 4 guns, I cannot be certain, for on the 5th of November last past, I was ordered to draw 2 of them by reason of a bonfire made nigh to the place, which I did, but did not charge them again." Charles Worrell, sworn, saith that as he was in prison with Michael Isaac, who was then also suspected to be a confederate in the drawing of the said guns, having several times discoursed with the said Isaac concerning what he knew, and that on the 16th of May last the said Isaac told him that he had or had been drawing of one of the guns upon the line, and as he was a purging of him, he said, "I believe you have a mind to be a witness against me." I replied, "No, they will not believe me." "Nay," replied the said Michael, "I know if you should come to witness against me, what I have said to you would do me an injury."